What I'd like to do is to introduce our final keynote speaker, and there's still people filing in. It's Robert Herrmann. He's the Managing Director of Mecardo. He's going to talk to us all about where we're at market-wise, the fact that we've got record meat and wool prices, a little bit about how we got there, but also particular eye for the future about what the situation might look like, particularly with such tight supplies of all our products at the moment and the delicate situation that our national flock is in. Plenty of interaction for the final session and plenty of good questions. So Robert Herrmann, thank you.
Thanks, Jason. You stayed. What did you stay for? Do you remember last year Nathan Scott was here and he was really dynamic, and I thought when Jason asked me to come here, I thought, Nathan, you bastard, why were you so good last year? But this has been about this conference has been wonderful because we've learnt so much, and again I'm glad I wasn't flying out a spear this morning, but I feel like right now, and at this time of the conference, we're preaching to the converted. You guys make the effort to come to these things. You guys make the effort to learn. And usually what happens at this time of a conference is that somebody stands up here and says, make sure you go home and do something. Make sure you don't just, take on all this information and next year come back and say, oh, I wish I had done that or I should have done something. Well, I don't think that's the case with this group. But we're not just talking in agriculture about you, about this group. And so one of the things I want to say to you to begin with is next time you go to your Best Wool meeting, say to your accountant or your banker or your livestock agent, you're coming with me, because agriculture is moving. Agriculture is moving quickly. And you people are hearing about it, but we need others to hear about it. To your neighbour who's in the same business, you're coming with me. Come on, we'll go and do this. And I was privileged on Monday night to be up at Wakul, and I probably never pronounced that right. Thanks, Rick. People are banding together in areas to confront problems. But what we need to be doing in agriculture, as with every other industry, we need to be banding together to take opportunities. So I guess a lot of people know our business is Mecardo, and we started off talking about managing risk. And I've got to tell you, it's pretty dull. It's like being an accountant. You go to farmers and say, you've got to manage your risk. And they say, well, tell me something that's positive. But what we know is that when we look at information and we look at markets, we not only identify and have the opportunity to manage risk, we see opportunities. So I just want to explain briefly how we go about coming up with these ideas and strategies and suggestions. And the guys who work with us told me this. I probably knew it, but I didn't articulate it. But we have to start with data. You have to start with facts. You have to start with something that is more than just, what I learnt over the fence or what Dad used to do. And it's with us, it's exactly the same thing. And as Deming said, you don't want to be just another person with an opinion. And hopefully that's the sort of reputation we're building. It's also, just to put into practice, just to give you an example. So data, which is it's almost the easiest stuff to get. But all it is just prices, reports, and on its own it's not worth much. And also the information, what's happening at the moment, what's happening around supply and price comparisons, that's reasonably easy to get and understand. But it's what happens next that's really exciting. And so the knowledge, what's the knowledge that we have about markets? What's the knowledge you have about seasonal conditions? What's the knowledge you have about management? How do you use that, and how does that get influenced on what you're doing? And finally, where the real success and the real money is when you transfer that to wisdom. So what I want to, and we all do that, but the way we can do it better is make sure that we start from facts and data and things that really are meaningful. And one of the reasons, and I hesitate to say this, but I thought about saying this or not, but in agriculture, and especially in livestock, too many opinions are based on just somebody thinking that this is what they think, or heard it down the end of the sale yard race or whatever. You know, as an industry, we need to move on from that. We need to be better than that. So data's the starting point. By the way, this isn't the end of the talk, Jason. Don't panic. In summary of this section, though, data is the starting point. Use your information, your calculation, historical information to enhance that data, apply your experience and improve the understanding, and then incorporate into the business scenario, and that's where you're applying wisdom to your business. And so all the people you've been hearing from here today are people who are giving you that basic underlying data, information and knowledge, but it's what you do with it and how you turn it into wisdom in your business is where the rubber hits the ground, where the money is made. So let's build a current... okay, you happy with that so far? I'll talk about the good things now. I'll tell you about how rich you are, how much money you're making from wool and lambs. It's not always like that, as you would know. I've spent, for my sins, I've been doing this for a long time, and there's times when you go around and things don't look good. So let's make the most of it when it is good. Let's just set the scene a little bit, though, and maybe this helps explain it a little bit, but what we don't want to be doing is explaining what's happened for the sake of explaining what's happened. We want to understand what happens so that we can actually look forward to the future. And so there's two parts to this sort of information. One is it tells us what's happening, but it also gives us information for what might happen in the future, what might be the influences on our businesses. There are more people living inside that circle in the world than live outside of it. And so when you walk down the main street, Melbourne, Collins Street, or if you're even more adventurous and walk around in Footscray, and you see a lot of people who are Asian origin, get used to it. There's a lot more of them in the world. The great thing is, though, that they're getting richer. So not only are they a huge and growing population, but they're a population that's getting more wealthy, and so in the next 20 years, they're going to be the really wealthy people. And the reason that's important to us in agriculture is because the first thing people do when they get some money is they try and eat like us, consume more protein. So keep that in mind as we go through. I'll talk about the sheep flock here. The world sheep flock is actually growing, but you've got to break that down because it's growing in countries that aren't going to ever export. They're not in the two countries where on that chart where the line of sheep population is actually growing is China and Nigeria, and neither of them are going to seriously export any meat or any wool anytime in the future. Demand is going to continue to increase. And the exciting thing about this chart is twofold. One is that it's going to continue to increase for sheep meat, but secondly, that demand is going to build not in the developed world, it's going to build in the developing world. And remember back to that chart where the developing world is and where the population is, it's in that circle that's close by to us. And what I'm talking about here is the future, but I'm also talking about this is what's influencing our sheep and lamb prices now, and it's influencing our wool demand right now. There's another couple of little changes going to happen, and Gundy and Lisa are still here, so we won't leave New Zealand out of the equation. In the past, and you can see with those squiggly lines there, more often than not, as a percentage of sheep meat exports into the world, New Zealand had the bigger percentage than Australia. So while they don't have a bigger sheep flock, they have a smaller population than we have, and therefore they had more of a percentage to export. That's over. The demand is going to keep coming, but the Kiwis have fallen out of love with sheep. The dairy industry has won in the debate over there, and so in the future there's no way that they can compete to deliver that share of the market. So that's going to be have a reduced supply out of New Zealand, which is going to, again, keep squeezing supply worldwide. Remember, there's only two countries in the world that have any serious export surpluses. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to put that in there. I think that's one of your sheep, Gundy, is it? Let's talk about price for a start. And it's a really good story for sheep and lamb. And let me just, this is my one complicated chart, so bear with me. It's late in the day. Terry Sim's still awake, so if he can concentrate, everybody should be able to. So what we've broken it down to there is we're saying on the, is it pointed? That doesn't matter. So the light green line there is the period 2000-2003. So across the bottom, we were slaughtering around about 1.5 million sheep per month. And the price for that period was somewhere between 250 cents a kilogram and 400 cents. Take the next period, 04-07, and you can see that it steps up to the right. And the next time steps up to the right. And in 2014, 2015, 16, you can see the blue dots. We're slaughtering more lambs and the price is higher. And then in 2017, we slaughtered I think it was about 1.85 million lambs per month, and the price average was around 600 cents. And in the spring of last year, we had, again, a big slaughter, which is what happens every spring, but have a look where the price is. And so what that's telling us is that this is a genuine demand-driven market. We're producing plenty, we're producing more, and we're getting paid more for it. And that's a good story because the classic standard economic model says as you produce more, price goes down. As price goes down, then if supply goes down, price goes up. So this is price up, supply up. And that tells us that some of the work that's been done in developing your industry in the sheep and lamb sector is paying off. So all the little things, and I'll make one comment about, and we hear often about work on tariffs. And I had a really good explanation from a guy up at a feedlotter in Brisbane at a talk, and he said, you know, we love where governments are working on tariffs and opening up markets. It doesn't happen, the impact on the market isn't tomorrow, but it's accumulative and drips in and slowly just builds and builds and builds. It's sustained and increasing prices as a result of those efforts. So are the current sheep and lamb prices sustainable? We think probably. Now don't forget that I think today, this week in Bendigo, you know, every lamb sold for over $7 a kilo. Well, you know, that's not going to be sustained week in, week out. But by and large, sheep meat has a strong outlook. The sheep flock is low, so any increase is going to be difficult in numbers, so that there's no, as I say, what normally happens when a market has strong demand is the price signal tells the producer to produce more. And so with a strong price, it's telling us to produce more. That's going to be difficult because of the numbers of the level where the sheep flock is. This thing about the spring, we know that it's a very seasonal offering, lambs. We flood the market at certain times of the year. And I think we're seeing a change in strategy of processors. Processors have this really strong demand, and so they're gearing up at times when they know there's a lot of supply to actually get their teeth into it and get going. And that's why we're going to see, in our view, stronger spring prices, or not as discounted spring prices as we've seen in the past. Once again, a positive. Demand is widespread. China demand, and just on the bottom I've mentioned mutton demand. And I was in New Zealand and we visited a farmer there, and he said, I'm a bit embarrassed. I sold my lambs for $165 and I got $155 for my cull ewes. You know, it's just stupid. It's not right. We've got to understand our markets, and I think last night we had a few lessons about what the markets think. It's not always what we think. And one of the things that's happening in Asia is that with the new this changing demographic of money and the way the society is changing, is they're looking for more protein in their diets. And when you think about cooking Asian style, where things are cooked differently, they're cooked longer, and mutton is a great product. So put some mutton in, it adds flavour, it adds protein, and you can cook it for 3 or 4 days and you've still got a bit of context there, you've still got a bit of texture. So we're going to see, and with the lower sheep numbers, and therefore lower sales of surplus sheep, we're going to see a tight supply alongside that. So once again, it's another little a little bonus to your sheep enterprise is that in the future, in the immediate future and in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to see that the ewe price or the mutton price is going to sit closer to the lamb price than we've ever seen before. The New Zealand influence continues to decline, and we get continued favourable movements on tariffs. So that's the sheep. That's our take on the sheep and lamb market. And as I said, it's we use that pyramid to try and come up with those ideas. Start with the data, the information, and then add your experience and try and turn it into some wisdom. The wool market's fantastic. And that's it. It's wonderful. It's wonderful for merino breeders, people who've stuck with merinos, to be there. And the other thing about it is, if you have a look at that, the top chart, the top line is in Australian dollars and the bottom line is in US dollars. I mean, these wool growers have now had one, maybe two of sales, wool sales that are very good. They'll get another one, maybe another one, of very good wool sales, and it's throwing a lot of money back into regional Australia, it's throwing a lot of money into the business, and it's throwing a lot of opportunity for us to start to position the businesses for the long-term future again. And I'll talk more about that. I'm leading up to something here. The currency is assisting. Don't let anybody tell you that, how smart we are that the market got to 2,000 cents, because part of that is currency assisting. If we were back at parity, then, Australian dollar equals $1 US, then our market is below 1,600 cents. But that said, 1,600 cents is great money. I can remember we had wool growers say to us, we just get $1,000 a bale, we could build our business around that. Well, now we're getting a lot more. And the challenge will be, what do we do with it? What do we do with it to make our businesses stronger, more resilient, and able to withstand whatever's thrown at us in the future? Fine wool premiums. I updated this chart last week, and that fall off the bottom at the end has only happened in the last 2 weeks. But so what I'm showing there is this is the difference between 18.5 micron versus 21 microns, and it's a bit sad, really, that in the merino industry we all went finer, because the market told us to do that, but it only tells us that for a very short period of time. And you can see the premiums there are short and sharp. And so what it's telling us is that we should be looking at our merinos as what suits our business. And part of our business in the future will be supplying meat. So therefore, and listening to Gundy and Lisa's story today about how you can do both. So it doesn't really matter this week whether you're selling 19 microns or 21 microns, you're getting paid the same price. Now, that's not fair either. But my point here is that in the future, a merino sheep will be a more holistic operation and enterprise than it has been in the past. And the other point here is when we talk about what's driving this market, what's causing this market to come up. So it could be lack of supply, it could be stronger demand, or it could be, we would have heard in the past, where markets have cycles. They go up for 3 years. Andrew Woods had a great theory. I think it went up for 3 years or 18 months or something and then down and whatever. We could be going through one of those. And the reality is we're probably going through a combination of all three. There's no doubt that the promotion and marketing of wool that's been happening has had an impact. There's also no doubt that the tightening of supply has had an impact. And this evidences it, because if you have a look at the bottom, the percentage change since 2011, the biggest changes have come from 20 microns and stronger. So 20 microns to about 25 microns are all well over 100% increases since 2011, whereas the fine wool is to a lesser degree. It's 40% for 18s and 44% for 17s. So it's telling us that tight supply is also impacting. And note the cardings, those things we sort of, I remember there was a time once where, we were only kids, and Dad said, go down to the fruit garden, dig up those dags we threw out there last year, and we were able to actually sell the mulesings. We can still mention the word mulesing, can't we? Sell the mulesing for $10 for a butt. So cardings must have been really good once before as well. This is the challenge though, and this is what your farming focus must be on. So what we've got here is the long-term greasy wool prices. And for anybody who hasn't met Matt and Andrew back at my office, and Andrew Woods up in Wagga, this confirms that they're nerds. This price goes back to $12.70. Greasy wool price back to $12.70. And so the first thing you see there, and I'm pretty sure we all see it, is there is a long-term decline in real commodity prices for wool. And it's a long-term decline for any commodity price. I could put wheat. Wheat actually looks worse. But the reality is that unless we're actually being more efficient and more productive and more innovative and doing things that are making us better, then the price isn't going to help us. It did help us twice there. For a free subscription for 12 months to Mecardo, can anyone give me the answer to the 2 spikes? Not the easy one, but the 2 spikes. Which one? Korean War is right. Now, Boney said the Napoleonic War, and I'm bloody hoping someone wouldn't say that, because I think it happened at the same time, but I think it was the Industrial Revolution. So we could both be right. So I don't have to give you a free subscription, Boney. Yes, definitely a free subscription over there. So what it says is that we will continue to be challenged. Price is not the answer to agricultural production. And that means the answer is being better continually, being more productive. Wool has competitors. So what this chart is showing us is that the 21 micron acrylic, average acrylic or PSV fibres and cotton in US dollars is the blue line. And the red line is the 21 micron 21 mpg for wool. And basically we follow along, and it makes sense. But what we've done, and if you see on the right-hand side, is that we've broken away. And previously when we break away, either synthetics have got to come up or we come down. So we're not smart enough to say which is going to happen, but we don't think that's going to change. The only way it may change is if the fact that we are now such a small component of the world fibre market and getting smaller, we're about 1.2% in 2014, maybe we can become, something magic. And in using the term magic, you can guess that I don't think it's going to happen. So that's a concern. The other concern for me, and it was interesting, in the last talk I was in, there was a bit of a discussion saying, how good sheep and wool is, we don't want any more of them. It's not good for an industry. It's not good for an industry that you can lose, in this case, in the last 10 years, the 700,000 bales of wool that's finer than 23 microns, so merino wool, that has gone to cropping. Basically, it's gone to cropping. And this is the... This is how it happened. So in 1990, we had almost 170 million sheep, and we put in about a bit over 12 million hectares of crops, and now we're down to 70 million sheep, and we're putting in almost 20 million hectares of crop. Prime lambs now are also contesting wool for acres, and we heard it in the last talk today that I was at. Perhaps some of the croppers, might come back. No, they won't. No, they won't. And people say, the reason cropping, got ahead was because it's exciting. Why don't you, get some of these young guys coming out of, all fired up coming out of Marcus Oldham and they're going to go cropping and show them a 3-bushel bag of wheat and tell them they're going to load, 5,000 of those a day and see how exciting it is. So what's happened is in the cropping area, they've changed the rules and they've changed it, and it's been to the detriment of us as sheep producers, because now it looks like it's more exciting. There's no more money, as we know, in that, but it looks like it's more exciting. So are the current wool prices sustainable? Maybe. Supply will stay constrained. But we know that wool market has risk at high levels. We know that we're going to be influenced by other fibres and their prices. Fine wool premiums are notoriously short-lived. Interesting thing, I never thought I'd see this, but growers are now managing the market price to some degree by passing in wool. And you can only do that when supply is really tight. So in my career, this is the first time there's been no wool stockpile, no growers holding any significant wools, and no wool in broker stores. So it's whatever, if someone wants to buy it, they can only buy it as it's offered. And so what happens, the market just softens a little bit. At record prices, by the way, the market can ease 15, 20 cents today. I'd be interested to see, if it was cheaper today, I'd be interested to see what the pass-in rate is. And what happens, at a record price, it drops 20 cents and the pass-in rate goes up. So you guys are very cocky at the moment. And good luck, because there's been times when it hasn't been like that. But it's an interesting conundrum. This is the thing, though, especially with wool. In our opinion, demand will contract to meet supply in the future. And if you think about when we go back to 2000 and whenever it was, we had those, before those 700,000 bales left, there's not mills out there now sitting at the door thinking, I wonder when that wool's going to turn up. The mill capacity moves on. The retailers move on. And so so whatever influence lack of supply is having on the price, that will go away. Demand will come back to meet supply. The positive to it is, though, that it's very difficult to increase production. Lower dollars helping. The challenge is we must introduce innovation, and you guys have got to do something you haven't done before. You've got to actually get involved when things are good. You're very good at getting involved when things are bad. When the price is on the floor, you'll all go and kick out the AWI board. Now is the time when we've got to do this innovation and set up. By the way, there's the long-term grain price. I just thought that's from 12.64, just to make you feel better. Those guys aren't getting any gifts either. But what they've done, what grain has done, is it's actually continued, even though the price has declined, it's continued to produce more in the world, and it pretty much matches population. So even though price is tight and tougher, and there's no great prices in grain in the last few years here, productivity is still growing and supply is still growing. So in real terms, the prices are in decline. So how have they done it? So the grain industry has maintained their call to the people who are looking for exciting farming exercises by increasing productivity, engaging in technology, machinery, fertiliser, chemical, cropping systems, and they're actually reducing the real cost per tonne to produce, which is what you've got to do because our real commodity price is decreasing. And as an example, Western Australia, which has had tough years, year on year, on those periods there, their wheat yield per hectare is growing. So the challenge for sheep, we've got to stop the decline in merino numbers, in merino wool and sheep numbers, number one. Number two, win some acres back. It's not going to be easy because most of the croppers have let they've got used to what they're doing. We've got to get next generation engagement at a greater level. It really annoys me when I go down once again and go and speak to one of our leading agricultural college students and you say, put your hand up if you're going cropping, and most of them got their hand up. Next is prime lambs, next is cattle, and I'll say, you two guys who haven't put your hand up, you must be going to do wool. And we must encourage investor funds. I want to talk about innovation briefly. How many? Two. Let's just think for a minute that innovation isn't science and technology, it's the application of science and technology, and it's done by people. So what you're hearing today, all the stuff you're hearing today about new ideas and new ways of doing things, that's not the innovation. That's the technology. The innovation is what you do with it, what happens out in your business. I want to talk about the sleeper in the room before someone asks a question. And that is that we must do something about wool harvesting. We must do something. And I'm fearful that we might be almost too late. I know there are things in the pipeline, and I'm excited about that. But what we have to do as an industry, we've had a chance at this. In 1980, we had a robot. And what happened? The robot couldn't shear as fast as the shearer, so we told the robot to piss off. 1980. The iPhone has only been around 8 years, so the technology back then was pretty good if you compare what we've come with since. What I'm asking you to do now is when It will come, a new idea to share, or someone thinking about something new. And unless you disagree with me that we have to do something about it. If you do disagree with me, then you show me whose grandkids are going to be shearers in 20 years' time. You show me where they are. And you'll probably show me people that you won't want working in your shed for a start. But if you do agree with me, then when the new innovation comes, when the new idea comes out, when someone comes out, because adversity breeds innovation, then you must support it. Don't say, we tried that before. How many times have I heard about the robot didn't work, therefore we're not going to do it, or the chemical didn't work? We have to actually embrace it, and that's where we can influence our industry bodies. Number one is make sure they understand where our problems are. Don't assume that they know, but make sure you reinforce it. But when they bring forward things, get behind it, give it a go. In other industries, we're very good at doing it. We as farmers are very good at being cynical. And this is not a time for it. We need to embrace the new ideas and the change. And so I'm as a busted ass shearer, I'm begging you, if we don't fix this, and I don't know how many people we've had come to us this year, they shouldn't come to us, but they do, saying, oh, this was the worst shearing I had ever. The team was terrible, they got there late, it was just a nightmare. And when you talk to contractors, they're telling us the same thing. They don't want to be in the job anymore. So we've got a problem. And it can be fixed, because farming and agriculture and the wool industry is great at fixing things. But what I'm telling you is we haven't got a lot of time. And so when the idea comes, when the innovation comes, and it's not far away, give it a go. Embrace it, support it, be positive. Here's my final point. I believe when the wool is at a record level, we don't need to be throwing heaps of dollars at marketing. What we need to do is throw as much as we can at R&D, at on-farm R&D, where the rubber's going to hit the road. So to finish off, get around each other and build the networks, because that's where knowledge is transferred, and get others in. Bring your agent along to the Best Wool Group. Bring your banker along to this meeting. For God's sake, the agent at the moment is your most expensive employee, so he'll do what you tell him. And they should be knowing about these things, because they can be agents for change as well. So with that, Jason, I'd say that's the last time I get invited, but thank you.
Authorised by Victorian Government, 1 Treasury Place, Melbourne.